Afternoon.
Going. Hello, Luda. How are you?
How are you?
All right. We are live and on the record. Welcome to the September 27th VAR large meeting in the crawl check room at 2 George Street. My name is John Robinson. I'll be the chairman this evening. Other board members present with us are Jay White, Lita Sobchuk, James Metters, Susan Brown, City Staff President Corey Barrett, Lawrence Courtney, and Travis Galley. The applicants tonight have been required to submit any documents, in advance of the meeting. Staff controls the slide presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the appropriate deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask the staff which slide they want to go to during the presentation. Applicant staff and board members are required to state their name when speaking, and please approach the podium. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the City of Charleston Public Meeting channel on YouTube. Your appearance here is your consent to be recorded. The order of presentation, for those who are not familiar with it, is that there will be an introduction and overview of the project by Ms. Parrish. This is followed by the applicant's presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit unless requested by the applicant that the time be extended. And then any questions at that time of the applicant from board or staff. Any and all presenters when speaking should clearly state their name for the record and identify their affiliation with the project, be it the owner, developer, architect, designer, or consultant. The applicant should speak during this portion of the presentation rather than later portions of the presentation unless called upon. The applicant's presentation is followed by public comment period. All applications are part of the public meeting. Written public comments were due noon yesterday, and any received comments have been disseminated to the board. Written comments are not read at the meeting unless it is requested by a board member and with the permission of the chair. Any person who is here tonight who wishes to be heard in person on an agenda item should state their name and address for the record. They are reminded politely there's a 2-minute time limit for their remarks unless extended by the chair. The applicant should not respond to public comments at the conclusion of the public comment period. Public comment period is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant has been afforded a response to clarification time with up to a 5-minute time limit. The applicant does not have to use the response period if they do not feel that it is necessary, and brevity is virtue. Board discussion and vote then ensues, and that once the applicant's presentation is over and the public comment has been closed, the applicant can clarify any inaccurate information being discussed by the board or staff when acknowledged by the chair by raising their hand and waiting to be called upon. Board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and their vote on any given motion. The chair will reread any motion made verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if I've incorrectly stated it, which is known to happen. Once the motion is in proper order and seconded, each member when voting should clearly respond yea in favor or nay not in favor. The results of tonight's deliberations will be posted on the city website at charleston-sc.gov/BAR. No agenda item has been deferred or withdrawn. This is a polite reminder for those with us joining us this evening to please turn off cell phones and other disruptive devices. And in terms of the contents of presentation, comments related to zoning, parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns are not in the purview of this board and therefore should not be voiced here. With that said, we'll move into part A of our agenda, which is approval of the minutes from the August 23rd, 2023 meeting. Since we missed one meeting because we had no applicant presentations. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as published?
So moved.
Okay, and a second for Mr. Metters in proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote?
In favor.
Mr. Metters, Sobchuk,
I was not there. Is that still okay?
you can abstain. Mr. White
In favor.
and myself, yea in favor. Minutes are approved as published. That moves us to our first substantive agenda application tonight. Applicant for 56 State Street, Ms. Parrish.
Right, 56 State Street is new construction in Height District of 4, and then the Old and Historic District. The applicant is requesting preliminary approval for a 50-room boutique hotel with meeting space.
Very good.
Some context images, if you will recognize the site. We've looked at several projects in that area, actually. Site today with Scotchman. And then we've got some context imagery of the adjacent streets looking downstate. And looking upstate. And some images from Cumberland. Wait, we are ready.
The applicant has the floor.
Eric, the clicker on podium should be working.
Thank you. I'm Eric Garris with fellow Garris Architects, and we are serving as the design architect for this project. And tonight I have with me Thomas Jasper and Trey Daniel from LS3P, who are serving in the role of production architect. Should any technical questions come up, they'll be available for response. Tonight we are back again because you guys love seeing us so much to present the developments in the 56th State Street Hotel project. Last submittal we made, it was deferred due to a few issues that felt needed to be addressed by the board, largely related to the north wall that is more so a blank facade due to its proximity to the lot line and zero lot line condition. So tonight I'd like to go through a few things that just highlight. I don't know that I need to unless the board requires clarification or me to present other items again that I'll discuss. And those are showing you the east wall with the adjacent garage in section to just discuss the visibility issues that you had with that. We've added signage to this proposal that we think is pretty successful in terms of keeping with the spirit of the design. And then also to discuss the north wall largely as the main issue tonight. So I'm going to move through board and staff comments. We do have responses to those, and I'd be happy to expound on any if you guys require any clarification. The site, as Tori mentioned, is at the intersection of State and Cumberland in the location of the existing Scotchman convenience store. These slides haven't changed from the last one. The streetscapes are the same. The height has not changed since the last preliminary deferral. So they are the same as they were before. Site plan has not changed. All vehicular entries, city improvements to be made are still the same as they were before. Floor plans are the same. We did include comparative slides here. It's slightly redundant, but I think it's important because as the last submittal was deferred, I do believe there's merit in having the ability to review what was the prior approval and the conceptual approval. So you'll see in these slides that I'll work through pretty quickly because the floor plans haven't changed since the last time. But we do have conceptual and current preliminary comparisons and deferred preliminary and current preliminary comparison sheets. This is that example. The mezzanine has not changed. I'll move through these. I don't know that the roof plan hasn't changed. And this, I think, is a better diagram from what we had last time, showing the height of the existing garage wall in the top section. And we do have an area that I'll show you in the east elevation that is to be less ornate in its finish than other parts of the building, but that's simply due to the proximity of this existing garage and the difficulty of providing finished material on a facade that you really can't access, nor could you see from the public realm. Materially, in the inspiration, it's the same as we had before. Deep recesses, good proportions. Images of corner entries that we discussed at the last meeting, and then some of the materiality that we had proposed. And I actually have physical samples tonight, should you want to see those for what we're proposing. And that hadn't changed with the exception of one material that we'll be discussing in a minute. The south elevation of the building, one of the comments was to add a gate. We do have the proposal for a gate to be added at the drive entrance and to carry high quality finishes into the garage area up to the parking area. That's shown in the bottom elevation, and it'll be detailed similarly to the way that the window patterns are so that it reads in kind to the rest of the details. Rendering of that. This is the top image is the last deferred submittal, and the bottom is the proposed. In these images too, you'll start to see some glimpses of the signage. We do have a signage sheet, which I'll show you. And as you remember, some of the comments that we had in the previous submittals were about the radius corner, the tightness of the radius and those sorts of things. And I think that we had resolved at the last meeting that the tightness of the corner radius was okay. So those detail elements have been kind of expanded upon in further portions of the building, meaning, you know, the balconies have a slight tight radius. The signage has a radial corners to it, just to kind of promote that sort of design inspiration and carry it through to the details. Again, north elevation. So the west elevation, there's really no change with the exception of preliminary deferred at the top and preliminary proposed at the bottom. And once we started locating signage, you can see it in the bottom image. It's just to the left of the tall corner entry on State Street and Cumberland. And previously we had the balcony shifted one bay to the south, but due to the proposed location of the signage and the ability to shift the balcony and not affect any of the rooms inside, we shifted it one bay north. But I actually think it works better because it places it more symmetrically in the building mass and helps it be better. You know, rendering, starting to highlight some of that. The east wall again in the section, the up to level 2, due to being able to access that on the east wall of the building adjacent to the garage, we are proposing the wall as shown, but it won't be visible from the public right away. And where it may be visible from the public further to the south, which is actually bottom left on the elevation, we are proposing carrying those brick finishes to the ground to avoid any sort of unfinished appearance of the building. So as we move into what will be I guess the biggest part of the conversation tonight, which has been the hang up previously, is the north wall. As you know, buildings are allowed to be within certain distances away from property line, and then once they are, they're limited and regulated by the amount of glazing and openings they can have without certain protections being provided. Conversations that we've had in the previous approval, probably even back to the conceptual, I'll admit that, have been to study adding windows. We did study adding windows, but it does significantly affect the layout. And, you know, in defense of trying to find the balance between what the desire of the city might be and also the realities of the developer, we felt that we needed to move in a different direction without sacrificing the interior layout, the program, the necessary support functions, so on and so forth. One of the things you see here are architectural patterns, and we had a collective conversation after the last meeting about what in the world are we going to do about this north wall. And we had heard it mentioned once or twice during the previous meetings by the board that perhaps we could consider a mural. I am not necessarily a fan, speaking, you know, from an honest standpoint of a mural, because I think a mural is temporary because it's paint on a building. And what you as the board rely on after the building is constructed is the fact that the owner will upkeep that mural and maintain the paint of the mural and in perpetuity until the building comes down. So we said, well, mural's a good idea, but why don't we consider something that's other than paint and something that's more permanent to the building that can't be modified very easily without great effort by the ownership. So we started to look at what is it that makes Charleston, you know, a good city other than the architecture, and it's the vegetation. And one of the things that we have around are large oak trees. So we thought about the area, and as you're looking south in some of the views, you'll start to see some of the treescape on the trees on the streetscape. And we just said, well, what if there's a way to blend in a tree into the elevation of the north wall with a darker color such that it minimizes the potential oppressive nature of the brick wall itself and draws your eye to something other first. Okay. And that's really kind of the impetus, I think, for how we started to approach this. And you can see in the slide at the bottom, For me, the first thing that my eye goes to is the tree. It doesn't go to the wall anymore. And I know that the wall is still there. Unfortunately, Charleston is a developing city and we're going to have walls like this that we have to contend with. But our effort was to try and find a balance between, again, what the board's concerns were and what we thought would be a practical solution to a wall that that we have to deal with. And this was the solution. So we've spoken to the mason who's working with the contractor on pricing and have a solution as to how we would get this to be built. But our solution is to lay in, and I think these are a little dark on the screen, but you can see here, start to lay in a darker brick color, which would be something like this, against a field of this red brick, so that your eye starts to read the tree pattern more so than it does the wall pattern. And then again, another view showing what that would look like. And then this, just to sum up, because I know my 10 minutes are about to run out, but this is a sheet that we included so you can see the stylistic direction that we're proposing for the signage. Building address signage at the top, addressing in the tile flooring at the corner entry, and then the building signage itself, you know, kind of in embracing the curvature details that we have that we've proposed subtly throughout the design to hopefully tie everything together. Flood panel information, and then a few images in the end, so that you can start to see some of the signage. And then in conclusion, should you find that the solution to the north wall is acceptable to the board's concerns and a practical approach to overcoming what is an otherwise difficult situation, we have included the technical documents for the project to date that include the details of construction. And if the board finds the solution to the wall to be acceptable, I would ask the board consider final approval with details to staff.
Okay, very good, Mr. Garris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on behalf of the applicant at this time? Any member of the public wishing to speak on this project? City staff comments or recommendation?
Right, staff conditions for approval. Short segments of glass are still proposed for the corner glazing. Previous board discussion has included radius glass as a critical component of the design. The board should weigh in a final time to conclude whether the segmented glazing adheres to the approved design or if radius glass is required. 2, regarding the south elevation and previous board comment, a door has been added to the garage, but a primarily opaque door would be better. Quality materials would still need to wrap into the opening. The applicant has already spoken about that, but an opaque door would prevent the need to match the glazing and light patterns with the rest of the building. 3, the blade sign design is elegant, however, omit 1 as the ordinance allows for 1 per business entity, having 2 makes for a busy corner. 4, the proposed treatment for the north wall combines architectural detailing and art, and both treatments were individually mentioned at the previous meeting. It is assumed that this wall would be covered up in the relatively near future by another building built to the 0 lot line. Staff still believes that wrapping more of the grid pattern from the east and south elevation would be an easier and consistent treatment. However, while the proposal is unique and interesting, the pattern does not wrap around those pilasters successfully. This leads to questions of whether the pattern should be held in between the corner and first pilaster or whether a less literal pattern should be used. And I realize there's not a real action directive in that, but those are our thoughts on, I think it's a cool thing, but was it fit? That's the question. And with that, our recommendation is preliminary approval with board and staff conditions.
Thank you, Mrs. Parrish. Response from the applicant if they choose to use it, Mr. Garris?
Can you go back, if you don't mind, so I can read those, because that was a lot. Regarding staff condition 1, I believe that the short segments of glass were, to my memory and recollection, were resolved at the last meeting because we had discussions regarding whether we were using truly radius brick at the corner, which we discussed that we were, truly radius metal panels at the corner that we acknowledged we were, that would then reduce the visual impact of having short segmented glass, but I could be wrong. But that's my recollection. I do agree that an opaque door would be good at the garage. That is a viable option for us to infill those mutton patterns with it. The blade sign, we can discuss omitting one, and then regarding the north wall, it is assumed it will be covered up in the future by another building. In a prior elevation, we did have more of a grid pattern proposed, more of a regulated bay pattern, but because of the mural, we wanted the mural to be on a canvas, which is why we stripped away some of the piers in the building. So we're caught in this catch-22.
Yep.
So those are the.
We can ask questions.
Yes.
Do we need the pilasters there on that wall?
I think I was trying to study that too. I think it's not actually a pilaster when you start looking at it. It's a little bit of a architectural term, bump out.
It could be going the other way.
Get closer. We get closer.
I guess I'm asking if it could be just a bigger canvas.
Just a flat plane. Could be.
Yeah,
I'll,
and the pilasters is just, framing
Right.
your picture.
Morris, can you go to slide 45? Whoa. Yeah, I'm always there.
you gotta let the old girl catch up.
Yeah,
Laptops from 1987.
and it's on the same subject, another question, it's a change of the colors, but is it flat? Or you have recesses, or you have?
It will be slightly recessed, yes.
So these pilasters are actually, this is not flush with this.
Correct,
This segment bumps out a little bit.
correct.
Are they, is that floor plan issue or
I'm sorry.
the pilasters for floor plan issue or why is it there altogether? I mean, you,
Well, so I'll show you here. So these, you have a bay here. And so what we did is we regulated this bay so that it was equal, right? So they were consistent among that elevation to provide some regularity, uniformity, meaningful design to it. This was then left over because you can see before it would be a different bay width, which would further, to me, confuse this elevation. And when this became a canvas, we wanted to be the canvas by which this tree kind of extended over.
Further board comments or questions at this time?
So you said you're in a catch-22. What is that? I know what catch-22 is. What is yours?
I have to remember what the response was prior to saying that. Mr. Metters, I mean, there's no way for us to,
You've never called me Mr. Marriage before. Come on, this is James.
all right, James,
Yeah.
sorry. What felt like a Mr. Metters response. The catch-22 really is, there's so much, this site is so tight and it allows for a 50-room hotel. And, by what the board chair said in the beginning, some of these zoning issues aren't the purview of the board, but we've been allowed to do the 50-room hotel. There's no way around putting a 50-room hotel in this property without building out to what zoning allows. Based on the functionality of egress, exiting, getting people out of the hotel, services, parking, all the things that make the project work, it pushes this wall, unfortunately, to the north as far as it can go, right? There's no way for us to reduce the hotel rooms that go along State Street are already less than kind of an average width dimension of typical guest room units that you can see in most hotels that you visit, so that we could get the number of rooms that make the project development work. So the catch-22 is we can't redo the floor plan to put window openings in it. We're trying to find a solution to appease what the board wants, but also the development team and what zoning allows. So it's kind of this myriad of issues that are coming together on this one wall that is seemingly difficult to solve. And I'm not disinterested in solving it, so don't take my response as, one that doesn't want to take into account the concerns of the board, because I really do. And we try to come to the board and present reasonable solutions. But there's a lot that's going on in this project that forces it to be what it is and to move and encroach as far as it does on the boundaries of the property.
So thank you for that's exactly what I was looking for. But so this piece of property is acquired and zoning and all of the different reviews that you go through before you come to BAR, which we don't have any say so in. They yield this product, and what it means that's going to be compromised is the architecture on the north wall, and this is the only thing that we have purview over. But the reality is that means that every other part of the process was more important than this, what the density is and how many rooms you can have and all of this other income. And I get it, but there are other options. The other options could have been talked about when the land was acquired. Hey, look, we're going to have a setback here because we're going to need to put windows here, and think about that, And I've talked in our previous meetings about other projects that, well, that wall will be covered up in the near future. Well, I mean, it may or may not be covered up in the near future. But that answers, I mean, you answered it. I get it. And it's a tough situation. Okay, thanks. You're good.
Further questions at this time?
So the movement of the Juliet balconies towards the center of or further down State Street was only to accommodate the blade sign.
It was to accommodate the blade sign so that if you
So
had
you
a
could
balcony,
see it.
you weren't walk out and it's directly right next to you.
Or if you're coming down State Street.
Correct. You can
See the
balcony.
signage.
Provide a little more breathing room between those elements.
Further questions, comments at this time? I would just,
Do you mind if I ask?
sure.
Sorry to interject, probably a wrong timing, but the comment about how that brick pattern wraps around those pilasters in that area. Do you think that in reality there would be a more successful application rather than do you think there's a rendering issue at play that would depict kind of that pixelation is not the right word, but how it kind of breaks down the literal pattern of the tree a little bit? Do you think in reality that's less of anything? And I can't remember what page it's on, but there's a rendering where you kind of get that.
It's difficult to build it because you have to have returns.
Here,
One of these, I mean, I'm not picking up on it here, but there's an image. I mean, you see a little, there's an image from this angle where you get
To lose
Yeah. And so the comment is kind of ruining that visual, and I wonder if it's in reality not so much.
And as a clarifying to that, Tori, it's the only thing you're changing there is the brick. Right. It's just the color of the brick. It's not being recessed.
it's being recessed.
Okay.
Yes, it's being recessed to provide.
Like some of the examples you showed us, there's.
Correct.
Right, that's.
So on pilasters, when it will be recessed, it will be very odd. Because you will see the straight lines which are broken totally. So you're losing the overall. Again, I think it's actually a wonderful solution. Then one who was constantly opposing this, trying to find a solution. And yeah, mural, I can give you examples, but it took 100 years from my hometown. Regardless, I think you are on it. As soon as you lose at least one pilaster, I understand you framing the recess and glazing. And by the way, you added another row of glazing, which is also really nice. And now it's kind of balanced. So if that pilaster is not needed structurally or whatever, could you lose it and just deal with one and have that image of the tree foliage kind of complete.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I actually think that this is a pretty elegant concept. And I've done things like this before, and you're gonna drive the mason crazy. But the way we've done it is a foreman is down there with a drawing that's like a bed sheet. Is like color one, color two, color one, color two, and it's totally possible. I do think Luda is right that you should use these pilasters as a picture frame and eliminate this one and eliminate the belt. Maybe you stop it here so you get symmetry there.
Right.
Pull this back, and that's your canvas. And I would pull some branches down lower so that when people are walking down the street, even if there's another building here or some point in the future, people will be like, what the heck?
Yeah, Angelo.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
I think it's really successful. And as far as the radius glazing, I thought that we had sort of determined that was a long shot, because I've researched radius glazing too for commercial buildings, and there's really no product that I'm aware of that meets code for design pressure and impact, unless you go to the extreme expense of assembling and testing
And
a
it-
window.
and it's more like plexiglass.
Yeah. And the signage, I agree with.
Yeah. But very quickly, and I'm done. I think your finials on the corner really disguise if it's radius or not, so I think it's working very well. So I don't have any issues with that.
Okay.
Signage, it's always been an issue for me. I know what you're doing, and I would love to keep that, but ordinance is ordinance.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. Rest of it, the opaque door and things like that, that's very doable. And so you are there.
I would agree, and since I myself have been talking about brevity, I just want to give the designers an A+ for creativity and a very thoughtful solution and a very thoughtful consideration of something we don't talk about, which is the durability of murals, and will these owners be invested in them? This is a great solution that makes it kind of permanent. And I also understand and very sympathetic to the fact that we don't have a guarantee, but we also know that we shouldn't be holding this building to design constraints or impositions when, even if there's not a guarantee, there's a very high likelihood these facades are going to be hit in the future. I understand that. And for the facades we do see, I think that they're excellent, elegant. I have no problem with the segmented glass on the radius. I have to defer to my design expert on that and understand the practical issue that you have there. Choosing where to have your blade sign, one or the other, the ordinance is the ordinance, and we all seem to be on the same page on the opaque treatment of the gate. So that's it from me. And any other comments before entertaining a motion?
I'm so on the other side of the
Sure.
fence, as you know, and the fact that we'd use an oak tree that, you reference as being a powerful institution on the city and on our streets, and we artificially create it to try to overcome a massive brick wall is unimaginable to me. And it's not a penalty to not let this lot be developed. The laws were in place when they bought it. And so exceptions can be given, but I don't understand why a generation of people would look at that, because we thought it was important to allow something to be done rather than just work within the guidelines that the city has, which include an opportunity to come from this board for variance, and that's what's happening. But I fall on the other side of this, and creative or I don't know what the word is. I don't find that incredibly creative. I find it as just an alternative to what has been submitted before. And if it weren't that, it'd be something else. And I really dislike looking at the large blank walls of structures for potentially generations. I just don't get it. Thank you.
On the other elements, you enjoy,
No problem.
just not that, okay, I was just making clear on that. Further discussion.
I will echo what James shared. I'm fine on all of the other elements, with the exception of the Juliet balconies moving. I actually prefer the weight closer towards the corner of the building. I think it anchors it more. In this scenario, I think that I can't find another example of a blade signage and the French Quarter. It's either on the side of the building or it's hanging off. And so I think that a restudy of the blade signage is appropriate as well. Also, you don't have in your rendering the 66 state archway sits between this proposed building and the one next to it. Is that part of the project to be demolished?
I just don't show it. I mean, it's
Okay.
there, it's not part of our property.
Okay.
I just don't show it.
It's a unique architectural feature that, if you go down there, you'll see it. And I'm not going to assume what happens to the two buildings on the other side because they are both historic. And so what I'm looking at right now is going to be seen for a long time. The Hat Man painting was first painted in the late part of the 19th century and is still around. And it's been redone to support it, but it can be a unique part of the fabric of Charleston if you want it to be. Changing the bricks is, I think, a cheap way to accomplish what the board has requested in different meetings. I think there could be the opportunity to not only do something artistic, but use it as signage that could be there after the hotel is no longer the vocative or whatever this is called. I think the applicant is familiar with what the board has been trying to push them in the direction of the whole time, and understanding the constraints of the developer, not necessarily of the zoning or other codes.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
I will have one more and be done. So again, we were looking at that North Pole for opportunities. And historically, you start from the ancient Rome, you get this every time in every city in Europe and people do something with it. And what the applicant had found, I think, to me, that's what we've been looking for. So it is animated. It has a value of, and it will be interesting to see the upgrade of the craftsmanship for the harbor masons finally. So I commend you. I'm sorry, but that's exactly what personally what I was looking for.
Sure, you asked to be acknowledged.
So, James, I totally get it. Like, I completely understand it. Like, as an architect, I see it one way. As a citizen, I see it another way. But also the way I try to approach it is I look at the evolution of the city, right? And with Charleston, if you drive around Charleston, there are blank walls all over. You just don't see it because it's like the outlet on the wall. We don't pay attention because it's just ingrained in the environment that we live in these days. And some of the best walls in Charleston are actually the blank walls on the sides of buildings. And ages ago, a master mason would work up front and the apprentice would work on the side. And you get this kind of textural quality, this canvas, really kind of textural thing that you wouldn't otherwise get. And then you look at the buildings that were 2 or 3 stories as Charleston was evolving ages ago against single-story buildings. And then those single-story buildings were changed to match the 2 or 3 story buildings. And so over time, we've always had blank walls against buildings that they probably shouldn't be, but it's the evolution of the city. And I don't say that I'm not advocating. I didn't design this building day one saying, I know I'm gonna have a blank wall here, right? And that's the best outcome that we can achieve. And I get the hesitancy on your part to support it. But I do find that these walls, if you drive around, the Francis Marion Hotel is a good example of a sheer wall, right? and a truncated cornice at the top. And, you know, what somebody could have imagined a building being built against it in the future that never happened, but it's there. And we just don't pay attention to that anymore because it's just part of Charleston. And I don't necessarily want us to be part of that legacy either. But in the world that we do operate in, you know, as a contractor, as an architect, and, you know, professionals that sit on the board making these recommendations or judgments, I think that that's important to remember, that not every situation was ideal when it was presented or constructed, but somehow we've survived, and it's become part of the fabric that we live in. And we can gain some sense of appreciation for it because it does tell a story. And, you know, for me, if a 4-story building wasn't appropriate here, then I would have hoped that zoning, when they were redoing the boundaries and the maps, would have said, this is a 2-story district. You know what I mean? And so I have to, the way that I can live with it is understanding that as the city evolves forward into the future, that these issues will become part of the backdrop of what we see every day.
So, I mean, I appreciate that. And Moody, you mentioned who are the Roman or the Greeks, and you mentioned the great masons from the past. And I think that blank wall at Prince Mary maybe had a Sears behind it. But, you know, the fact is, I mix those two, and I get it, I understand it, but then Luda throws in the word animated. And so there's a big difference between animation and then your great Greek or Roman walls and your great architectural walls created by these real artists and masons. And so I get all that, but when you start throwing in animation to do the same thing, I don't get it. So, but thank you, and thank you for that response. Yeah, sure.
Further board commentary. I'll introduce the motion unless anybody has a. White, all right, I'll make a motion for preliminary approval, including board comments to refine the masonry at the north wall, retain the segmented glass, and including staff comments regarding the signage and the garage door.
Can we add? Try the pattern on the mock-up plan?
Yeah, I think, yeah. Include pattern on mock-up. Yeah, and I think because of the specificity of this, I'm actually not suggesting this go for final review by staff. Because I think seeing it one more time and then seeing how you might model this in the mock-up is going to be a pretty crucial aspect.
Mr. White, do you accept the friendly amendment offered by Mr. Chuck?
I do, including the pattern in mock-up.
Is there a second to Mr. White's motion?
I second.
So 10 seconds. The motion's in proper order. Mr. Brown, how do you vote on the motion?
No, not in favor.
Mr. Metters,
Nay, no.
Ms. Sobchak,
Yay.
Mr. White,
Yeah, in favor.
and myself, yea, in favor, passes 3-2. Thank you for the discussion. The preliminary approval, but it will come back for final before this board. So we're doing the mock-up now.
Thank you, Mr. Matters.
I hope zoning was listening too.
That is a conversation I've been begging to have. The decisions made there leave a lot of woe on our table.
John, very rarely do I not just align myself with you completely, but I don't know that we still can do our job, and it doesn't have anything to do with zoning.
That's okay. Well, we can do our job and it doesn't have anything to do with zoning, but the reality is the majority of people coming in here in the public who don't like something that comes over here is not even the purview of this board. That's my point.
Yeah, and I think they're coming here because they don't understand the process of TTC and everything like that. We're the sexy thing, right? We're what people can actually see.
We're the
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah, I
that's,
don't know that I would include myself in the section.
I wouldn't include you either, but you know.
My last one, I think it was like that, and what they did, it's a creates opportunity for the public.
I agree with that opportunity part. I agree with you.
Anyway,
Okay.
ready to move on?
Ms. Barrett,
Okay, item C.
Thank you,
is
students, for
going to
coming.
be- Thank you. We're gonna talk about, how do I phrase it, other business. We're gonna talk about BAR meeting schedules in 2024. Ms. Mandy here is with me. I think you all know her. She's our director of operations, so she is very well versed on this, but I also printed the slides for you if you want to follow along with the slides will be the same in print as on the screen. But looking a little bit historically at 2017, when we made several ordinance changes, I want to talk about before and since 2017. So let's move to the next slide. Okay, before 2017, there was one Board of Architectural Review, and you all had 22 meetings a year to a month with 2 off for holidays. The deadline to meeting cycle was 10 days. Jurisdiction was south of Line Street, and we had 6 staff members on the team. In 2017, several big changes happened. We broke into the BARL and BAR small. That doubled up the meetings. So we went from 22 meetings to 44. That was a 100% increase in meetings that we host. The deadline to meeting schedule stayed the same. However, we expanded our purview and we added thousands of properties north of Line Street. Our staffing stayed the same until last year when we actually grew to 7 staff members. So just want to make the note, 6 staff members. We finally got a 7th, doubled the number of meetings, kept the same deadline schedule, and expanded our purview. So next slide. So looking at BARS, BARL, and DRB, and we will be concentrating on BAR, but the Preservation Division hosts, each one of those boards hosts 2 meetings a month, so we have 62 meetings a year. Our deadline meeting cycle across all 3 boards is 10 to 12 days. And we did some estimations and ran some stats on how long it takes to produce a meeting. So it takes roughly 40 hours to produce one of these average size meetings from BAR staff. A typical agenda at BAR has 6 items. BARS is running at their agenda cap of 15. DRB has had 3. So what would happen if we looked at changing the meeting schedule and the deadline? Go to the next slide. So BAR small, but there are 15 items every meeting cycle right now. We're not going to talk about changing their meetings or changing the number of their meetings. We are going to talk about changing the time between getting a project submitted and having a review at the meeting. We would like to talk about extending that. BARL, however, except for last year when y'all were having 8 items almost every week, we've shifted down to roughly 3 to 5 consistently. And oddly enough, in the last 2, this meeting and the last 2 were very odd in that we canceled one. We had the 1 item tonight, and then you had 1 4 weeks ago. So very odd. Things have lightened up a lot. But what we want to do is with that, and knowing how many hours it takes to produce a meeting, do we want to look at changing how many times we meet? So we do. We want to propose this. So we wanted to propose shifting the deadline, revising the number of meetings, and increasing the agenda limits in case we do pick back up. So I'm going to show you a meeting deadline schedule in a second. But as far as the board meetings, we want to talk about one from 2 to 1. And I'm going to echo this in DRB. We don't need to talk about that one tonight because it's not in your purview of what you would vote on, but same thing for DRB for consistency. We're talking about reducing the number of meetings and extending the deadline at DRB also. All right, next page. Deadline shift. Right now we have a deadline on Monday. We have our meetings the following Wednesday. That is actually only 9 days that we are reviewing. Those are calendar days, not business days. So it's pretty tight turnaround. And as you know, as many of your applicants, we're not able to get comments out to you sometimes until the day of as board members, you know that sometimes those comments come to you Wednesday afternoon. It would be really great to give those to you earlier if we had more time to do a thorough review. So in giving us a more time between deadline and meeting, we could accomplish better public notice and improve transparency. We could get that information out to you all sooner, to applicants, and to the public. And like I said, it would give more time to thoroughly review plans. And I think that would help staff, board members, the public, and applicants. Second piece of this was to talk about adjusting the number of meetings per month. I did talk about agenda caps and how many items you've been running, but there are also costs involved with the number of meetings. There are the demo notices that we put in the paper. So there's advertising costs, security guard needs, and then the benefit or disadvantage to you, depending on how you look at it. With that, there would be fewer board meetings for you to come to. But we may have to look at some longer meetings. The big key in this is that what do we do with all that time that staff gains back from the production of a meeting to actually what do they do with it? And that's the big key, is that we would be reallocating staff resources and time. Next slide. I guess I do have the clicker. Sorry about that, Lawrence. So looking at how many hours we would get back for staff to do something just as constructive, we estimate that by reducing to 1 meeting a month, BARL staff would gain about 20 hours a month to put towards other means like permit reviews and site reviews. The city architect would have more time to support all board, staff, applicants, and special projects. There are lots of evolving special projects that we ideally would be on all the time. We'd like to get in front of. We just are spread a little bit thin. There would be more time for the staff architect to conduct quality inspections of large projects under construction. Lawrence would be freed up to make additional site visits, midpoint inspections. These would be really good, as you know, to uphold your decisions and to uphold the approvals that are in place. And then a big key is that this will give more time for the division staff to focus on permit reviews, customer service, site visits, final reviews by staff. Okay, next slide. So a few more statistics about our meetings. Across the top. All right, so the number of hours it takes to produce a meeting, we kind of talked about that. So roughly about 40 for BAR large. That comes down to about 875 staff hours per year. We're averaging 6 items per meeting, but as you can see, this year we've lightened that up to 5, and in the last 2 weeks, we would totally destroy that average a little bit. We would have to lower that. I've got the agenda items per year here, if you're interested. And then I want to make the caveat of that these numbers include extensions, mock-up panels, vested rights extensions, and policy discussions. So in these numbers, it includes everything, not just project reviews like we just did for 56 State. And then on the last page of your slides that I printed are potential BAR, LS, and DRB schedule, reflecting an extended deadline of 23 to 24 days between submission and review. So again, reflecting a good 3 weeks to do a thorough review. And only 1 meeting per month is reflected in this. So the big takeaways are additional time to do a really thorough review, getting this in front of you guys earlier, getting in front of the public earlier, and giving staff some time to put towards other important projects. And then another thing I'd like to say is that we're really looking at this maybe a test case, a pilot program. Do we sell in it if we were to move forward with this? And I'll tell you what that would take, but we are looking at it as a pilot for 2024. We are all working within the understanding that let's give it a try. If it works, it works. And if it doesn't, we add meetings back and we need to talk about when we would revisit it. So that's kind of what I want to put in front of you tonight. We're not going to vote. We're not going to take any action. I want to put it in front of you so you can think about it and ask questions. We are sort of on a tight timeline in that the changes, most of these changes are in your rules of procedure, and you have a red line copy of that already. So these are items that you would be able to vote on, and I'll explain that in a second, but there are some items that may affect the public notice, and that's in the ordinance that would go in front of city council. So I wanted to kind of divvy up that real quickly. The rules of procedure for the BAR are in the appendix of the ordinance. So appendix D is the rules and procedure for the BAR. And that is voted on by you guys. That is a document that you own, you document, you revise, you change. And the items that are in the rules of procedure include the appeal process, the agenda cap, how many items you cap out at, the meeting schedule, what days and which Wednesdays of the month that you meet. Public notice is enhanced in this, and then the order of the hearing is in that document. The ordinance, which any changes from the ordinance would be voted on by city council, includes things like the board composition, term limits, how we break down between BARS and BARL, what our districts are, what our purview is, what the levels of review are. And then there's a little bit also about public notice and the disposition of board and board decisions. So that's why we've got to look at it rather soon, but I wanted to explain what's where and what's within your control and what's not. So, questions?
That's an excellent presentation.
Sorry.
Well, I think the only other thing I would add is that I think since 2017, we've been trying to figure out how to administer 2 BARs in a DRB while not getting the staff requests that we need, from city council, because they have a lot to think about. So we keep asking for more staff, but we kind of stepped back this time and said, okay, what other options are out there if we don't have enough staff? Because our BAR and our DRB team members, they are swamped, like the most that I've ever seen. With people coming in wanting permit applications for like immediate fixes to their house or final reviews by staff, and they just can't get to them because they're so front loaded with meeting preparations and productions, which is like incredibly important because what we see out there in the field is what y'all are doing and reviewing. So we're not discounting the importance of that. We're just trying to figure out a way to manage that. And I would also say, even, if you need to mull over the going down from 2 meetings a month to 1, which again, we could evaluate in June or July of 24 and then almost add more meetings in. I do think regardless, we have to adjust the time between the deadline and the actual meeting date. 10 days, 9 days, it's no longer, it just doesn't work. So we've got to provide more time in there for staff to do their reviews, for the public to be notified, and for y'all to get comments and plans a little more. So sorry. But open to other suggestions. I mean, y'all have been living this, breathing this for a number of years. You're also part of, you're also part of the development community, many of you. So we value your perspective from that point too.
So as a part of the development, as an architect, I have 2 things to mention. I really think I like it. As an architect, I think by that we may be able to reach to staff before we start with the projects and have more quicker meeting with staff and more meaningful. So we have a get better directions. But also the second point for me, every 2 weeks and sometimes we get deferred or whatever, and the client says, oh, so we go for the next one, which is within the same months, but we essentially have only 1 week to prepare if we go that. So this way, we don't have to defend ourselves anymore. We will have that month or whatever to prepare. That's kind of my 2 points.
This is all well researched. I'm impressed with the time that you put into it. I like to think that our board is a big advocate for our staff because you guys are like the Marines at Wake Island. You're talking about the personnel issue and the time issue and the time constraints. And I know y'all like your work to look good and look thorough. And I know you don't like sending us notes and comments the day of and being harried and rushed with all that. And so who knows what happens with development in Charleston or whether we get an uptick in applications. If we do, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I have no problem with it, would endorse this plan, especially as staff thinks it's going to make them better able to do their jobs. That's a pretty simple one for me.
Well, so I have a little bit of a contrasting opinion here. I'm going to be candid, but I don't mean to berate or criticize staff. So I was on the board for 5 years before we split into 2. And the total volume of the throughput for the board that combined was regularly 20 items. That's why the board was split. Our total number of average applications between BARS and L is still less than that. So the volume of work has dwindled over the years. But what did change circa 2017, 2018 is the advent of final review by staff. which what that actually means is a full review of a complete set of signed and sealed construction documents, and staff reviews all disciplines. And last time, Lawrence and I talked about this, each time, like the project we saw tonight, when that finally goes to FRBS, it'll probably take Lawrence about 30 hours to go through that, to generate the initial comments. And then there's more time to reply to the response from the architects, and so back and forth it goes. That was introduced by Corey's predecessor, not criticizing him at all. He was trying to catch changes that occurred between the last time we touch it to the time that it gets built. And some of those changes would be introduced by bad actors, frankly, when they submit their permit sets. But now the bad actors have realized they don't have to do that. They just change it during construction, because no one on staff is well understood within the development community. No one on staff has time to go out and just pop into a job site. The infamous tales of Charles Chase showing crawling up on the roof and dropping a tape to the sidewalk to make sure you weren't building it taller than it was approved. That can't happen. So I understand trying to save time for staff, but I think that the real culprit, what's really dragging you down as a staff team, is this final review by staff thing, because it's actually not functional. It's, we get the comments, you get the comments. If the guys that were here earlier could speak to this, they get these comments too. It's a lot of it retreads things that were already discussed. And I think, and I've advocated for this with y'all before, I think that you should really seriously curtail, if not eliminate, that process for most projects. And then, like, if you had 30 hours available, you could hit every job site in town. And then the bad actors are like, oh, shit, they might show up at any moment. And that's the enforcement power that you need. I don't mind extending the deadline. I mean, if the deadline is rolled back 20-something days, then by the time you get deferred one night, there's no way, like you're already out at least a month. So that would solve that problem. And I think that meeting twice a month with this sort of load is actually pretty manageable. But what's not manageable for y'all, and this all happens behind the curtain, we don't necessarily see it, is this FRBS thing, because it's completely and utterly broken.
Well, who handles that then in that scenario? So if we just eliminate that, who does that?
Well, we see it at final. Like, what happened is we used to say, preliminary is good, final review by staff. And what we meant in 2017 is you submit your final BAR package according to our submittal requirements to staff, and they review it and they say that's good, and then it goes on to permit. And then there's always this looming threat that staff might pop in and see if you're building it the way it was approved. And there was no review of the sign and seal permit drawings. And I've come to believe that that doesn't actually yield any benefit, because you can just change it later. You can get permits for it and then downsize your windows. Ken Granada doesn't care. It's not his job to care about that sort of thing. So FRBS was intended to make sure that the design wasn't diluted as you move towards permit, because the permit office is not policing that, but it doesn't actually catch it. I mean, I've been involved in many, many cases over the years where I'm asked by staff, hey, could you pop over and look at this thing? We were asked to do our construction completion walkthrough, and it's different from design. What do we do now? And the answer is, there ain't shit you can do, because the BAR and the staff do not have the power to go to the building official and say, don't issue a certificate of construction completion because their windows don't match what was designed. Water's under the bridge, it's too late, and it's built. So I think that's actually the real issue. My concern is that if you don't fix that particular staff level process problem, then giving you more time is just going to make that problem expand to fill the void.
One more thing, I think we also said, prior to dividing in this so many boards, we also had special meetings. And so that was,
For things we knew were going to be hell on wheels, like.
overpowering. So
Lawrence, were you gonna?
Yeah, I think I am absolutely compelled to respond.
Mhm.
I think your observations in part are right on target. I would actually be discussing some of this with Mandy yesterday or day before. And yes, there are, we absolutely have to. And I am actively working on right now, finding ways to cut out a lot of what we had been doing at final review by staff. I do, however, think that it is a necessary thing for staff or somebody, and frankly, I don't know who else would do it. That there be somebody to make sure that what finally goes for permitting is what you guys wanted. And the only people that really know what you guys want are is indeed staff. Another thing is that, yes, absolutely, we need to find a way to be spending more time out in the field. Because right now, a pre-construction conference and then the large gap to final inspection, that's a recipe for disaster.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to fail every time on some level. And we have to get back where somebody's on site at least 2 or 3 times during construction, just to catch those obvious things that happen, that we all know happen out there when a big building is being built. So, I'm sorry. So I think that I think that the answer here is yes, absolutely. Find a way to streamline and truncate down final review by staff, realizing that it is still an essential part of the process. And secondly, get more time out in the field.
So I'm taking off when you were talking about responsibility and issuance of the CO when something's not built according to the plan. I mean, the big thing, Mandy, that comes to mind is the 8th floor of Dewberry, where he just did what he wanted to do. And but at the end of the day, all departments got together, said, okay, we'll make these arrangements, and if you do these things, then we'll move forward. So I actually thought that there were more controls in place. When I heard you say what you said, I mean, there's just no controls. I thought there were some, we're not going to issue a CO if it's not built according to plan. We have no controls in place like that.
Well, no, so before, and now we call it this a CCC, and Lawrence, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah Moore involved with this on a daily basis. So we do have like final inspections for a CCC or CO to be issued, and that's when building inspection goes out. That should be like when Lawrence or BAR, Frankie goes out for BAR small, so they're going out and inspecting the site, taking the BAR plan and saying, yes, build according to the approved plans, and TRC folks go out there. So there is this final inspection that is made or should be being made as part of the final sign off and the issuance of the CO or CCC.
Because I mean, I have been involved at the request of the city maybe to look at something before it wasn't built according to the plans, and, you know, we give a position on it, and then CO is not issued until they make the corrections, and the corrections are made. So I want to just,
It depends on what it is.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say
If
that
it's-
could be
if it's-
structural if it's design, then.
design's what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, but if
like
it's
structural design versus visual.
one
Well, it's
excellent,
visual- This was visual, what I'm talking about was it simply wasn't, if you looked at the picture, it didn't look like it.
yeah, I mean, there are a few cases like Hoffler Place, the corner of Spring and King is not built according to the design. But what was wrong with it was so, like, you'd have to peel back 10 months of construction to correct it. The infamous west facade of the Tech Center parking garage. Did not.
We were there together.
Yeah, and did not meet expectations. And there wasn't anything anybody could do about it. And that's what happens. And you know, as boards and commissions like ours have faced increasing political pressures, we don't, you know, if you've got a CCC for $175 million worth of construction running on the line, then we don't have a whole lot of truck in that conversation. And I think it's just something, you know, I don't know really if the Tech Center garage could have been fixed by, you know, staff popping out regularly, but if it happened to be that you saw the first panel coming off the truck, or whoa, wait a second, you know, that doesn't look quite what we expected, that maybe things like that could happen. I just think that you put staff in a really politically compromised position when they're asked to hold the line after the line's already been breached, you know,
And that breach has happened because people didn't do what they were supposed to do.
that's right. That's right.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just unfortunate circumstances, as I believe it was with the Tech Center garage. Sometimes it's people who are like, I don't want to pay for that.
Right.
And all of a sudden, all the copper is painted aluminum, but you've got a $400,000 roof sitting up there. You really think you're going to get them to peel that off? Yeah.
Well, the tech centers are great. The tech center is what drives me on issues like tonight.
Yes.
It's just the same thing, because when we looked at that little piece of mesh for the tech center, it's big. Then when, who called us?
Well,
And
Dennis,
we went over there, Dennis
Dennis
called
called
us,
us
we went
out
over and he
there.
said, what do we do about this? It's like a mile. of that. And I said, oh my God, I saw that when I was on the interstate.
it literally, that facade is literally the size of a football field. It's a full acre of precast concrete. Yeah, but you know, I mean, it is what it is. But I don't know. I know pulling up the FRBS thing is a little bit beside the point, but really what we're talking about here is maximizing the effectiveness of staff time. Because you know, we're volunteers and we ask to be here, but or we're voluntold, but maximizing staff time, you can't tackle that topic without addressing it.
But to echo the chairman, whatever the staff would like to recommend, I think is probably the most important thing.
So, Mr. Chairman, just one more thing, because I think about the BAR small, and I think about a homeowner, and they deviate from the plans a little bit, and then somebody during that final inspection goes, yeah, this is just not gonna work. And it maybe is a $15,000 fix or $20,000 fix, but their feet are held to the fire. Yeah, we've got the $10 million facility or the $15 million facility. Like Jay says, you know, we're not gonna peel it back for 10 months, but
I mean, I would, but have no brought to my attention. I got no problem.
I got no problem with this, but in fact, at the Dewberry, we did that. It was a real solid exposure of we on there.
Yes.
Glad I asked that question.
It is being recorded.
Yeah.
Still live.
You know, it's but I mean, that was what it was. And
Well, and it sounds, it sounds like we're having a couple open discussions. Number one, the research is good. Number two, staff has made clear what they think is more efficient in terms of use of their time. Number three, we have identified some related concerns that maybe warrant more feedback from y'all on the things that Jay in particular and James brought up, on making sure that if in this reallocation of time, what I hear from everybody, what I hear from people who are not on this board, members of the public, what I hear from responsible members of the development community is, what are y'all gonna do on enforcement and dropping hammers?
Yeah.
And so just let's, in having gotten this feedback, maybe you bake those concerns or remarks into how this reallocation of time, because I agree with Jay on what he said. I think y'all are best empowered to tell us how to make that work. We've identified this concern, you tell us how to fix it.
So I have one question about public notice. So if you make the submittal deadline, what was it, 23 days prior to the meeting, something like that? Does that really change your public notice requirements by law or by ordinance? Do you have to take that back to council?
The reason why we had to take it back to council is that it's specifically addressed in the ordinance.
In the ordinance, not the
Well,
So the ordinance actually says submittal.
yeah, and I think it's fine. I got to come through the ordinance with a little bit of a finer tone. I know that there's some public notification requirements about demos in particular, because that's in the ordinance proper. So that would have to go back to city council.
Yeah.
But I would hope city council would be in favor of giving the public more notice by making, even if it is with schedule adjustments. And I think the one thing, for us to reiterate too, because BAR large and BAR small, they're very similar, are two very different animals. That BAR small is going to keep trucking.
Right.
2 meetings a month, so they're still, they don't get that board, and those staff members do not get as much relief. And that's in part because, homeowners, these are usually smaller projects, homeowners need to get, and we get them through this process, but, so back to your question, there are some specific tweaks that I think we can be surgical about with an ordinance amendment.
Yeah.
I do think it's coming to the council, but we'll investigate.
Yeah, I think one last thing, and I know I'm taking up a lot of airtime here, but it's something I've thought a lot about. I think that there are a lot of folks in the design professions that are not going to be comfortable with this, because even though you don't want to be put in a situation of denial on Wednesday and a shotgun submittal on Monday, we plan project schedules out years in advance. And because we meet twice a month, I can say that for my practice, as long as we don't get shot down, the BAR workflow does not impact our schedules at all. TRC, totally different conversation. But if you go down to just 1 meeting a month, it will slow the progress of work, for sure.
What additional staff have you asked for or do you need? But both the head count and in what areas?
I don't know that I could give you the most thorough answer, but we have asked for a staff architect next year. Another staff architect that could support all architectural reviews across any and all boards. So that's in the budget. Honestly.
Yeah,
For sake.
We've been lucky. It took us a number of years to get our associate planner enforcement position. I think we requested that maybe 3 or 4 years in a row. We finally got it in 2022. Yes. But yeah, we do have the staff architect. That request is going to city council this fall for the next year, for next year's budget.
There's never been a time in my 11 and a half years on this board where staff has not been begging our elected officials for additional help. Your father-in-law was like, why don't we just raise the fees by some
X to pay for
tiny
it.
amount, and it would generate more than enough to pay for a full-time position.
So I just want to say 2 things since we are on the air. I was part of the Dupree resolution, so I want to make sure I make those comments. But secondly, I'm like you are, even though I am going to support what's best for the staff, the 2 meetings a month for us, we program that, we're making presentations here and we prepare for, we kind of know if we're going to get pushed back on something. So we're already preparing for that next meeting before we get to our meeting. So it would, I think, effectively have a negative impact on us. But if it's something that we need to do for the staff, that's the way, that's the way it goes.
We don't put
So,
40 hours in it.
So right now, none of you all as an applicant would have a meeting Wednesday night and resubmit on Monday. I mean, that's impossible.
I think I've only been asked that a handful of times by clients, and I tell them it's a hard no.
Okay, so right now you have 2 weeks to turn something around. Well,
Now, there have been times where we'll pull something, if it's some little, additional conversation
Right.
with the
yeah,
city staff or with the preservation group, like this, we're gonna pull it, let's talk. And if we can reach consensus, we'll resubmit it on Monday, unchanged.
so you left a meeting, you would have about almost 3 weeks today to turn something around into it. And on the new schedule, you would have what, a week? Sorry, I'm doing the math. I can't do the math.
Yeah, with the 23-day, it actually makes it a shorter term.
That gives applicants a shorter.
So you're
turnaround.
basically talking about a 2-month to your schedule.
But it gives you, yes, but it also, you can't turn anything around about Monday, but you could if you had a whole week, you could turn it around. So there's positive and negative to that. I know usually on these projects, you can't turn something around that large that quickly. I got you. So then if you're not comfortable with the meeting schedule change, but you're comfortable with the deadline change, that's because they're still in 2-week increments, correct?
That's right.
Obviously.
Yeah, and your submittal deadlines and your meeting dates are gonna leapfrog.
Yes.
It's gonna take me a minute to wrap my head around. But yeah,
But we should prepare to vote for this at our next meeting. Is that what the hope is?
I think so. We do want to share this information a little more broadly with the design community, maybe strategically.
it's out there.
Yeah, okay. Well, and so, yes, we think the next meeting, because what we want to also do is make sure we can publish a schedule like mid-November, so people can start planning 2024 with regards to their critical path forward and their submittals. So we think the next meeting, at the very latest, that following meeting.
Yeah.
But if you have any other concerns, like if you are concerned about, going down from one meeting and increasing the number of agenda items to 10.
That doesn't bother me.
It'll be a longer meeting, but we are open to solutions and a pathway forward to make everybody's life easier and better and more efficient.
So I'll share with Mr. Chairman that there've been times when we've had meetings where it got towards the end and I wasn't a good board member. I mean, I wasn't focusing like I was at the beginning of the meeting. And I would imagine that that's true for the applicant also. So and it is different at the BAR small. I say that, I don't know why I say that, because they're here till 10 o'clock sometime also.
Well,
But those- yeah, but so that's my only, concern with
I've been through agendas where we had 8 heavy items and you're done.
Yeah.
Like if 56 state is the smallest thing you gotta look at. Like I tallied it up one time. There was one night we had a full agenda and we looked at almost 1.5 million gross square feet in one evening. And
I mean, the plus side is that, again, with more space between the deadline and meeting, there's more opportunity to get staff comments ahead of time, get the plans to you ahead of time. So it's not, just all cramming at the last minute and kind of on the fly during the meeting, but it could be a long meeting. That being said, again, this past year, I think the board is averaging 5, the BAR large is averaging 5 agenda items per meeting. Now that includes demos, new construction, that includes policy statements, that includes mock-up panels, that include vested rights. So if we started breaking that down and actually looked at plans like projects and demos, it would probably be a smaller number.
I get that. I think that's true. But there are still those nights when we had 7 or 8 that were intense, and those are the ones I'm talking about. Because there are sometimes you come in and you go through 3 extensions and then you have 2 applications and then you're out. And I get it.
Yeah.
Or we will correspond.
Yeah.
Everyone send in what you have.
Yes.
We will be prepared. I would say staff be prepared to present for a vote next time. Okay.
I guess you need to are you talking to BAR small about this tomorrow?
Okay.
I want to ask something. It's not related to this, but we went through, I've been 4 years on this board now. And we see build a lot of large projects and things like that, but we don't have an opportunity as a group to visit these projects when they build. It's like, it would be really beneficial to
Well,
me.
to follow on what you said, when my father-in-law was chairman of this board, they would actually, and Jay, you may remember this, he would set aside a day that the board was going to meet, make sure it was noticed, but it was basically a board mistakes day. And the whole purpose was to go around and look at stuff that was non-compliant or stuff that was a design, like these big blank walls. You go to like 10 sites and say, can we all agree this is a mistake? And, one of the things about that Charleston Tech Center wall is it's a public exemplar to say, we ain't not doing that again. I hate to be that way about something so obvious because it is a miss and I love our cityscape. Obviously, I wouldn't be here on this board, but I think it might be worth having a mistakes day. Let's go out in the field.
But besides mistakes,
Just celebrate it.
I would like to go through these buildings, even interior wise.
Sure.
And see what actually we accomplished.
Yeah.
Not just mistakes, but
I think that's a great idea.
and
I like
we don't have this opportunity, and I'm passing by on East Bay, all these buildings, and say, okay, one day I'm going to step in and.
I think we should do that. Maybe we can have wins and losses day.
Yeah.
Well,
So
we got
maybe
the board
you-
retreat coming up, so I'll line up some visits. That would be fun.
As board members, could we go to if Lou said, you know what, I want to go see that job, could we go do that because we're part of the board of architecture?
Yeah, I think we can help organize that so you can do it as a group. I also think that if you called, Morrison Yards right now, Zach Bearden, and say, hey, I want to go look at your project. I was part of the team that approved that. Zach would be like, please come by anytime.
Well, you want to deputize.
Yeah, but as a
Group, yeah,
As a
we can work on.
we can share again mistakes or
Yes, we can work on.
accomplishments and,
Actually, meant just. as-
learn
Yeah.
from that and what we we have differences.
And maybe give Tori some ideas of, which one building or two you wanna see and we'll see. I think it's very good. Y'all can all write it together.
Okay, is that all?
So, all right, thank you for putting that.
All
right.
Thank you.
All right, we stand
Thank you, Mr.
adjourned. Yes, yep, absolutely. You'll have a great evening. Thank you for your hard work.